Welcome, everyone. This is Jordan with Ravens Flash Report, and welcome to a Ravens live stream post game after a win. Great win against the Buffalo Bills here in week 4. So, we're going to go through some stats, some performances, basically, what does it mean? And what we're going to start out with, we're going to start out with the stats. Okay, so let's talk about how these Ravens players did. Starting out, of course, with our quarterback, Lamar Jackson. He goes 13 for 18 for 156 yards. 2 touchdowns, no picks, sacked once, quarterback rating of 130 or passer rating of 135.4. Um, Josh Johnson came in. He had one pass, one catch. I think it was to Henry in the end of the game there for 1 yard. But on the ground, Lamar goes 6 carries for 54 yards and a touchdown. He did have that one fumble, but luckily for the Ravens and the Ravens defense, it didn't prove to be too costly. Other numbers. So Derrick Henry, and we're going to get a little bit more into him later, but Derrick Henry, 24 attempts. So this is the second week in a row where he's been north of 20. I think last week he had 27 against Dallas. He had 24 this week, 199 yards, 1 touchdown, and it says 1 fumble loss. That's the one that went into the end zone that was recovered by, I believe, Patrick Ricard. Long of 87. I mean, just to start the game with that was much needed. So, but we'll get into him a little bit later. Justice Hill, he had 4 carries for 18 yards. Again, his were, I think, a good balance of not only using him for passing downs, but mixing him in with Henry. So that was a good. I think this was probably their game where they had the best balance for that. Speaking of receiving, Justice Hill. 6 for 6, 78 yards and a touchdown. And again, I'm going to touch into this a little bit later when we get into the whole, Derrick Henry and, dominating this game and their approach to using Hill and Henry. But yeah, Hill was just most targeted. I think their game plan for this going into this was to sort of spread this Bills defense out. Obviously, the 87-yarder by Henry to start the game forced them to respect the run a little bit more. And then as they were using Hill, taking these little pop shots right up the middle by him, using him in the receiving game started to work more and more, especially for picking up those first downs along the sideline. The rest of the Ravens receivers, kind of a quiet day. They had some big plays when they needed to. Likely had a 26-yarder. He was 2 targets, 1 reception. Bateman had 1 catch. He did have that target in the end zone, but that was waved off for the defensive holding. But Bateman goes 1 for 23. Aguilar, 2 receptions on 3 targets for 10 yards. Flowers, really quiet day from Zay Flowers, only 2 targets, 1 reception for 10 yards. Derrick Henry goes 3 for 3 for 10 yards. And then Andrews, he only had that 1 target that he started to run before he caught the ball. Hit him right in the hands. He had it and then just let it go. But again, if Andrews had a couple of excellent plays. He had a great block for Lamar on his touchdown, and just was honestly out there pancaking guys. So he's really picked up in his blocking game. So that's great to see. For Tucker, no field goal attempts. He was just 5 for 5 on extra points. I find myself caught in the middle because I want to see him gain confidence. I want to see him make kicks. Obviously, in this game, it was unnecessary with how our offense was moving the ball and how successful we were in the red zone. But I do want to see Tucker get some more attempts and get that confidence back up. Moving on to the defense. So for the defense, I mean, Hamilton leads the team. He has 7 total tackles, and he was kind of everywhere. And I think we're starting to see this defense, especially in the secondary, round into where we want some of these players. Obviously, we're still going to be mixing it up, but the ability to have Stevens on one side and Wiggins on the other with Marlon in at the nickel, it gives free reign for Hamilton to kind of do whatever he wants. And that is honestly where Hamilton plays his best football. If he's able to just, out of nowhere, go after the quarterback, or he's able to just simply slip into the middle of the field and or even attack the gaps and take down ball carriers that way. Roquan Smith, kind of a quiet day. He did have second on the team with 6 tackles. He had that huge hit on Cook I think it was in the either the first quarter or second quarter. It was definitely first half. But Cook kind of like slices through, and he makes a couple of guys miss, and then as soon as Roquan hits him, you just see Cook's head snap back. I just see his hair just go flying backwards. Um, Humphrey had a great day. He had that weird on the Josh Allen turnover. Um, he had that weird sort of interaction with Kincaid where he kind of like shoved his face out of nowhere, seemingly out of nowhere. We don't know. Maybe something was said. I got to think that something is said because that's so out of character for Humphrey. He's not really that type of aggressive type of guy. But we'll wait to see. I'm sure for the podcast. I'm sure he'll touch on that. He better touch on that if he's going to talk about anything else. But he does have a pass deflection. He had a near pick, but I'm sorry, not he didn't have a near pick. We had two near picks from both Stevens and from Wiggins. But other guys on the defensive note, looks like Adisa Isaac was out there. He had 3 tackles and a tackle for loss. So that was good to see. Wiggins, he had a pass breakup. Wiggins looked much more comfortable in this game than he did against Dallas. Obviously, Dallas was picking on him a little bit, but Wiggins looked extremely comfortable. He looked extremely sticky. He was tight on guys, tight coverage. And even Brandon Stevens. I mean, I didn't talk much about Brandon Stevens. He had 4 tackles. And the ones to Keon Coleman, honestly, he was in great position. It was just an excellent throw by Josh Allen and a good catch by Keon Coleman. They didn't end up mattering much in the grand scheme of things, but still good play. Good play from our corners. Let me see. Eddie Jackson, he did have that one almost sack where he came flying in. Humphrey also made a play like that. Adafe Owe, he gets another sack, and I think that was on the Eddie Jackson blitz as well. But Owe, I mean, the big thing about this game for me from a Ravens defensive standpoint was as good as I felt the corners played, and I thought the safeties played a little bit better as well in this game. It was the front four and the pressure that we got on Josh Allen that sort of made this game basically out of the Bills' control very early on. They couldn't stop our front four in the first. I want to say the first 2 drives they held our pass rushers, our front four on both of those first drives, which led to penalties. And then after that, they're like, all right, we got to stop with the penalties. We got to stop holding. And that's when the sacks started to come in. So, Josh Allen had only been sacked twice coming into this game through 3 games, and he got sacked 3 times in this game, which was a stat that I said he would have. He didn't throw a pick. So I said I think both of those stats changed. Both those stats didn't change, but he was sacked 3 times. So getting back through the end of the defense there, because we got to talk about Kyle Van Noy. And my goodness, he's through 4 games, he has 6 sacks, and he didn't have anything he didn't have a sack in the game against the Chiefs because he had, freaking broken orbital bone, but goes out of that game, doesn't come back in. The next 3 games, he's had 2 sacks in each game. He's already got 6 sacks through 4 weeks. I mean, people were questioning before the season when he was saying, like, I'm going to be a pass rush specialist. People were wondering if he could even do it. People were saying, like, oh, well, this guy's been kind of more of a middle linebacker coverage type of guy, plays the run. He's a very smart player, but can he actually be a pass rush specialist? Obviously, he can. Now, will he keep it up for the whole season at this pace? I don't think so. But again, Adafe Owe is there. He's adding pressure. We're seeing a lot of pressure coming up through the middle, even though Nnamdi Madubuike didn't have a sack in this game, and neither did Travis Jones. They are so close. And obviously, Josh Allen is a really hard quarterback to bring down. I think both Dak Prescott and Josh Allen are probably some of the more difficult quarterbacks to bring down. But with the interior pressure that we're getting from our front four, that makes life so much easier for Zachary Orr, and he can dial up whatever blitz he wants. Again, having Humphrey come in, having Eddie Jackson come in, having Kyle Hamilton come in. These guys can come in, they can come flying all around, and we don't have to worry about having too few people in coverage because we can just put pressure on them with our front four. So, getting into some of the team stats, we did end up owning the time of possession, not by much. 31 minutes to 29 minutes, basically. The total yards was completely in our favor, 427 for the Ravens, 236 for the Bills. Um, and the rushing yards just, and pretty even on the passing game, is 155 to 156, according to Bleacher Report. But the rushing yards were, I mean, the Bills ran the ball on us better than any team we faced, and it still meant nothing. 81 yards for the Bills on the day, 271 for the Ravens. Now, obviously, almost 200 of those were from Henry, but 271 yards. I mean, we had more rushing yards than the Bills had total yards. So that's, if you need a stat to pull out of this that says how well the Ravens dominated this game, that would be the stat I would pick. Another one, first downs. We had 22, they had 12. Turnovers, 1-1. We did sack him 3 times. Lamar got sacked once. But the only stat that I think is still an issue for the Ravens as a team, we still had 8 penalties. Now, 8 penalties is apparently less than our average because we're averaging over 10 a game. So 8 is less than that. But some of those flags were picked up. Some of them were declined. So we did have more than 8 called on us. But again, this still continues to be an issue for this Ravens team. And what I don't want to happen is, if we're having a game as good as this, as dominating as this, for a penalty to potentially completely ruin whatever drive we're on or completely ruin whatever momentum we have. Now, the Ravens, I felt definitely coming out of the second half, had sort of a stalled momentum. And this has been kind of an issue with the Ravens for most of the season, to be honest. I mean, we've only been through 4 games, but it definitely felt like the Ravens have come out flat in the second half, and I'm not really exactly sure why. They were able to get their mojo back a little bit better as they kind of got going again. They got the run game going again, but the Bills started to change their defense, and I think the Ravens offense, they started to react to what the Bills were doing. So I'm glad to see that we were able to kind of change our approach to what the Bills were doing. We gave Lamar a little bit more, we gave him some quick reads and things like that. But the Bills started to bring pressure, and as the Ravens struggled to kind of pick it up, that turnover by Josh Allen, I thought was huge because that was basically the onside kick of the Dallas game, but in our favor. Because with that fumble recovery, I mean, we just put our foot back down on the pedal, and we went from being, again, are the Bills going to get, because they went right down the field and scored, and then we went another 3 and out, and it started to look like it was going to be one of these second halves of the Ravens, and it was getting a little dicey. So penalties are still a little bit of an issue. So I have a couple of other topics that I wanted to talk about here. I already spoke about the pass rush, winning with 4. You don't have to blitz as much with that, and without blitzing, obviously, they talk about Mahomes, and Lamar is another one where you bring the blitz and their passer rating goes up when you bring the blitz. These smart quarterbacks and these quick throwers of the ball that have these little dump off guys, if they can pick up the blitz, then they've got the numbers advantage on you. So the less we have to blitz and the more effective we are with our front 4 getting pressure when we don't have to blitz, then that leaves more guys in coverage, and that's better for keeping, sort of the plays in front of us, so to speak. But Henry and Hill are, I know I talked about, especially at the start of the season, Henry and Lamar being a great complement to each other because of their styles of play and sort of what they can kind of scare a defense into doing, or not doing with the hesitation that they cause. But honestly, Hill and Henry are turning into a phenomenal complementary group. And especially with how the Ravens have started to actually incorporate Hill into more of the run game, right? They're not just, we started off the season, it was like, okay, Hill's out here, we pass the ball. Henry's out here, we run the ball. And they've done a much better job. Todd Monken has definitely done a much better job at sort of putting those, is he going to pass? Is he going to run? They've sort of kind of used those a little bit more complementary. I mean, to have Henry obviously have 199 yards on the day, but then to have your leading receiver be Justice Hill with 78 yards. I mean, again, we didn't need to pass the ball very much in this game. We controlled the clock. We controlled the momentum. Pretty much every time we went down the field, we scored in the first half. And then, we were able to keep our foot on the gas in the second half, which is phenomenal to see. I was just, I was except for the weird timeout call injury thing with John Harbaugh kind of, the Bills did call the timeout, but then it was sort of redacted because of Marlon's weird. Which, does anyone know what that is? What was that? Because he came back in the game and he seemed fine, but it was literally just like he made a good play. That was when he had the diving pass breakup and on Shakir, and great play, fourth down, and he just goes in the middle of the field and just raises his hand and just sits. So if anybody knows what that's going on, I'd love to know. But um, I mean, with Henry and Hill, getting back to that, I mean, the complementary football that these guys are playing is, if the Ravens can keep this up throughout the rest of the season, that I think is what is going to make this Ravens defense, or Ravens offense, the most dangerous, because you know what you're getting out of Henry for the most part, right? Again, he had 3 catches out of the backfield. With Hill, okay, you know what you're getting out of him for the most part, because again, he ran the ball for 4.5 yards per carry. He only ran it 4 times, but he got a few first downs out of that. And when the Ravens choose to use those plays, and when they choose to go to Hill on the ground or go to Henry in the air, that is what is going to really sort of put a lot of these defenses off their game. And then, of course, you've got Lamar, who, whenever he wants, he can just take off for like 12 or 15 yards right up the gut. And that specifically, that ability, that is what I was most interested in seeing with the start of this season, because obviously Lamar Jackson is great at running the ball. Derrick Henry is great at running the ball. But when Lamar can pick his spots, and when he can attack with full confidence, knowing they think we're doing something else, no other quarterback in the league, I think, has a better advantage of that than Lamar Jackson. And it's in part due to having Derrick Henry there and establishing the ground game, establishing the fact, as they very much did in this game, that we're going to run the ball because you can't stop it. And even if you sell out to stop it and you think we're going this way, Lamar could just leak out the side and just go right down the sideline for, again, 8, 10, 12, 20 yards. And every time you do that, you cause the defense to hesitate, which is going to make more opportunities for pass catchers. It's going to make more opportunities for guys like Hill and Henry. And it's just going to make these defenses and defensive coordinators throw up their hands. So I love to see that. I love to see that we're consistently getting better as the season goes on. We're making these improvements and adjustments. So the Ravens corners, they looked fast. They look physical. I love to see that both Humphrey and Stevens were, I mean, they were tight in coverage. Wiggins, obviously, I spoke about him earlier. He was great in coverage. Excuse me. So we talked about them, but the physicality, I love that they're getting their hands in there. They're breaking up passes. And, again, the weird thing that Humphrey, between him and Kincaid, whatever that was, I'm sure that'll come out at some point. But the physical play that these guys are having, again, having Marlon Humphrey in the slot has been so great, because the ability to have Wiggins outside and Stevens on the other side, like that combination with Kyle Hamilton roaming, is just excellent. And I think we saw a bit of a better game from Marcus Williams. Again, he's had a pretty rough start to the season. But hopefully, with, again, great pass rush, good coverage, and hopefully not being taken advantage of, which Rowe definitely got burned on one pass to Kincaid up the middle for one. But again, everything feels a little bit better when you win, but those are still the kind of things that I know Zach Orr and Rowe and Marcus Williams and these Pro Bowl guys, they want to fix these. They want to be a little bit more consistent with their coverages. So I just have here, Henry is insanely hard to stop for 4 quarters. And, again, is he going to have, John said, I think, in the second week, he said Henry's not going to have 30 carries a game. It's like, well, okay. I mean, he doesn't have to have 30, because if he's going to have 199 yards off of 24 carries, obviously getting 87 is great. But after he had 87, he still had, over 100 and some yards on the day just from that. So that was I mean, having Henry in this offense does completely change it, and I'm glad that the Ravens offensive coordinator and this offense are starting to gel with using him. The offensive line, again, it's not perfect, right? That was a couple of penalties. Faalele, we saw Rosengarten get one as well. Um, Makari, he also had one. But again, you're having Rosengarten. That was his first start at right tackle in his career. You had Makari, who was playing right tackle, move over to left guard, and that's the great part about his game and his versatility. But again, having these changes, you're going to start to see some penalties. But honestly, if they can keep Lamar clean and he's got time in the pocket, that's when we saw those really sharp passes. When he had great like protection in the pocket, that's when we saw the great pass to Likely. We saw that great pass to Aguilar in that extremely tight window that I think in hindsight was probably a little too tight, but he made the throw. Um, and again, this goes into my next point here. It's more of a question though. Did the Ravens learn to keep the pedal down in these games? Was this a game where obviously we go into halftime 21-3? They come out and like I said earlier, they come out a little bit flat, but they were able to get their foot back down. They were able to retain control and sort of put this game away with just again still running the ball, but I thought their play calling, the diversity of their play calling, they stayed aggressive on defense. The defense staying aggressive the entire game, I thought was probably the best decision for this team in this game. And I definitely think that's more than excuse me, sorry. Even more so than the offense staying aggressive with its play calling and how they were sort of using Lamar and Henry and Hill to kind of break up these running games. See, that's the other thing with Dallas is I think they started to get a little stagnant just running Henry the whole time. And in this game, they were breaking it up. It would be Hill, Henry, Lamar, Henry, Henry, Lamar, Henry, Hill. So they were sort of mixing it up. So the defense still didn't know what was coming up next. But I really hope that this coaching staff and these coordinators have, not every game is going to be like this. The run game, as good as it is, and it does look phenomenal, it's not going to work like this every game. Like if it does, I'll be so happy to be wrong. I I love being wrong if it's going to be something like that. I hope we come in and we have almost 300 yards on the ground every game. Like that would be the most fun Ravens season we've ever had. But it does seem like it's not going to be like this every single game, right? So we have to know if the Ravens offense and defense is going to keep the pedal down, even in a game where the run game isn't working as well. So, I mean, I think the Raiders game is probably the best example of that, where the run game wasn't quite where it is right now. We still saw the offensive line struggling a bit. And later on down the season, we're going to have some tough games later in the season. And if we are, for some reason, not as capable running the ball in those games, are the coaching staff, are they going to be versatile enough with their play calling? Are they going to be able to adjust? And they're not going to come out flat in the second half because you might not be up by 3 scores at that point. So I want to know how the Ravens look, not with a huge lead and letting it up, but can they hang with a team that's within a 1 score the whole time? I thought they actually played better against the Chiefs than they did against the Raiders. But um, last couple things here. So Hamilton and Van Noy, they are extremely disruptive on defense. Hamilton doesn't really have a lot of gaudy stats, but you could see him. First off, his open field tackling is phenomenal. And I think the first 2 weeks, I think it was a couple people were saying it, but it didn't really seem like what his skill set was and how Zachary Orr was sort of getting his fingers into this defense. He might not have known how to best use Hamilton, but with Wiggins being trusted on the outside, and again, his game got better with this one than it was against Dallas, with Marlon Humphrey looking healthy, with Brandon Stevens being sticky in coverage and physical, the ability that Zach Orr has to implement whatever he wants to do with Kyle Hamilton and use Kyle Hamilton however he wants, that's phenomenal. Van Noy, I don't know if he stays on this, if they want to call it a heater or anything like that again, but 6 sacks through 3 games and 2 in each game is insane. And if they have to start doubling him, then that's going to make life easier for guys like Namdi Matabike. It's going to make life easier for Adafe Owe. I'd love to see um, Ojabo come in and do a little bit more. But yeah, some other players that I wanted to bring up. Obviously, Patrick Ricard deserves a huge round of applause because, I mean, talk about unsung hero. I'm glad he was able to jump on that football. I was texting a friend during the game, and he's ahead of me by a play or two, and I know he was loving it too because I'd react to something and he's like, oh yeah, like you think that's gonna happen, and so but the Patrick Ricard touchdown, that was great to see because that's great awareness by him. Rosengard almost had it, so it was good to see that. But I mean, again, his blocking is so consistent. The consistent blocking and the opening up of holes. I mean, I I was worried that they might not keep Ricard on this team a couple years ago, and again, glad to be wrong, right? And I don't care if he gets a pass or he gets to run the ball himself at any point, but what he's doing right now and what he's being asked to do and how well he's executing that I think alone is dramatically improving our ability to make this offense work with Henry and Lamar. Um, Adafe Owe, again, he's so close. He's so close on so many of these. I was glad to see him get the sack ruling on that. But it was just, he is close. He's right there. Marlon Humphrey, again, my guy. I gotta shout him out. He's my favorite Raven, and the comeback tour, the vengeance tour, the whatever you want to call it, he's not done. And it was great to see him play fast, physical, even coming in screaming into that blitz. It was great to see a fully healthy Marlon Humphrey. Wait to see whatever that weird floor sitting thing is. Travis Jones, he looked fantastic. He was getting pressure up the middle, which, we know he's great at stopping the run, but I think he also had a tackle for loss against James Cook. And if it wasn't a tackle for loss, it was right at the line of scrimmage. But you just see this humongous arm come reaching across and just grab him and pull him down to the ground. We just have some great players on this defense. And as they're getting up to speed, as this offense is getting more consistent and we keep our foot on the pedal, I think you're going to see a lot of success like this. Because the early goings, it was rough. Getting that offensive line to gel together, to learn how they want to protect Lamar, how they want to use Henry in this run game, how to block for him. These are still things in this defense. Zachary Orr, his first year. How do you use these players? You've been part of this organization, but making the play calls and using these guys it's a different beast. But we're starting to get our feet under us. This win against the Bills were the best team in football. There might have been a couple other, up there teams and everything. But I mean, to knock the Bills, out of that undefeated run that they were working on there, 3-0, and now they're 3-1. So this was a great win for the Ravens in week 4 to get back to 2-2. We got the Bengals coming up next week. That's going to be our purple game. That's going to be our new uniforms unveiling for that. I think that's another primetime game. So looking forward to that. Yes, that is. Oh no, it's not a primetime game. That's later in the season because that's a 1:00 game next week. So looking forward to that. Not sure if I'll be able to do a live stream there for the reasons I mentioned before in the post, but thank you to those of you that came out, and stay safe out there and go Ravens.